Welcome, all pregnant families, midwives or birth workers. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week, we will be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Dee shares her story of two births. After her first experience, she decides on a home birth, and her goal is to have a vaginal birth after caesarean. She prepares by completing the Transform Your Birth course and accesses many resources to support her belief in herself, even in the face of other people's opinions about what she should be doing. She develops a wonderful relationship with her home birth midwife, and this proves to be a very important part of her experience. Ultimately, she ends up transitioning to hospital, where she is met with alternative viewpoints and conflicting information. Decision-making in these circumstances can be very tricky, and we discuss how Dee was able to follow her own guidance with the support of her home birth midwife. A story with lots to teach us. Enjoy.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. Most of the stories you will hear through this podcast are graduates of the Transform Your Birth workshop held in Canberra. Our Transform Your Birth Today course is now available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and includes all the wonderful wisdom of this course and live weekly catch-ups when you need it with our host, Tracy. For a little taste, please accept our pregnancy gift offer, which contains free the first few lessons and some essential wisdom for pregnancy. The link can be found in these show notes or visit transformyourbirth.com.au. And now for the episode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Transform Your Birth podcast. And with me today is the lovely Dee. And Dee's got 2 children. And I love having people with more than one child on because every birth teaches us so much and it often sets up for the next birth. So it's important to realise when you are preparing for your first baby that putting a bit of energy in for your first baby can make a big difference to any future births that you have. And that's why stories like Dee's can be really helpful for us to learn from. So Dee, thank you. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
Now, you were having your first child and you were pregnant. How were you feeling about giving birth, the idea of giving birth, and what sort of preparation did you do for baby number 1?
So after I had a bit of birth trauma, I think, from the first one. The preparation I did was to find a doula. And the first one I found happened to move away shortly afterwards. And she was lovely. I had a really good bond with her, and I felt really comfortable. Then unfortunately, she had to move away, and then I came across another doula who had just come off mat leave, and she also happened to be a birth photographer, and she didn't deliver in any way that I had hoped for. So leading up to the birth, we did some run-throughs on what she would do on the day, and just pretty much just took me through some of the illustrations of what obviously happens when you birth and things like that. And I think I called her when I was on the way to the hospital. Unfortunately, everything kind of went downhill from there. So when I arrived, I was already as far as I knew, having the regular contractions that they tell you to go to hospital once you're having. Yeah. And when I arrived, the first midwife that saw me, she's pretty much just oh, look, you're only this much dilated, you should go back home. So yeah, to put it into perspective, she went home, and then I think maybe came back the next morning, because I think this was on Saturday night, roughly around between 8 and 9 p.m. I think I got there. And then she came back the following morning after I was obviously still labouring. So I ended up labouring for I don't know, maybe 30-ish hours around that. And I had many different midwives. So the first one was like the one that kind of, I guess, put me off and like probably made things slow down a lot, because at that point I was, I guess, very anxious and just not in a good headspace. And then she said like, oh, you should go back home. But then I think after a few hours, she's like, oh, you can actually stay. It's okay. And then she started putting like the monitors on me. And I think from there, I just had several different midwives coming and going and, check in how dilated I was. And eventually someone decided to break my waters. And then I think from there, I'm trying to think, sorry. Just it happened. There was so much happening. I think they got to the point where they were like, oh, look, I think it's best if we give you like the hormones, like is it Syntocin?
Yeah, Syntocin and the synthetic oxytocin to push labour on a little bit.
Yeah, because I was only, I think, 6 centimeters at that point, and that was Sunday night. So this was like, I think, around getting closer to like the 24-hour period. And so I ended up getting an epidural because at that point I was just so exhausted and I just couldn't like physically and mentally. I was just like so drained, and I was just like at that point. I don't know if you've probably heard many stories like this where they end up like giving in to some sort of pain relief because they've just so tired. Oh, and because like I tried to sleep, but every time I tried to sleep, I just couldn't because of the contractions.
So Dee, it sounded like when you went into hospital, you didn't actually end up going home. Is that right? Did I hear that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
So you ended up staying, and one of the goals that's worthy in labour is to stay at home as long as you can, for the very reason that you're likely to dilate better at home. Because once you go into the hospital, one, you're under the clock, and two, you're in a very different environment. It can be bright, it can be light, very distracting, people coming and going. Once you're in there, they have to obviously monitor the baby, which it obviously is a good thing to do, to keep an eye on Bubby, but also it can be very distracting. So you came in, you'd been in labour for a very long time, and getting an epidural after being awake for a long time and not being able to sleep is a really good idea, because you want to try to have the energy it takes to get to the finish line. And epidurals can be very useful in those conditions. But one of the things that's so important, particularly with long labours, is to pace yourself. Because when you put a lot of energy into an early, like a long labour in the early parts of labour, then it comes at the cost later down the track. So that was a lot to go through, and to have a long labour like that. Now, can I ask you a quick question about the waters breaking? What was the reason they decided to break your waters?
To help like get labour, I guess, to help bring like labour on, I guess.
Yeah.
So
do you know how many centimetres dilated you were at that time?
I think between 6 and 7, I think.
Yeah. Now, breaking waters is something that can happen at any time within a labour. If we do it too early, though, it can predispose babies coming down in and malpositioning their heads. So if you picture baby being in a bag of waters and the uterus is shrinking, it's retracting, which then starts to put pressure on the baby to move into that lovely tuck dive position, hopefully with the crown of their head presenting, because the crown tends to mold and compress much easier than other parts of the head. Although women can birth babies sunny side up, they can birth them with all sorts of head positions, but it does tend to make it harder, and it can lead to a much longer labour. But sometimes it can be really appropriate to break waters, because it can be the fact that the way the baby is can be causing labour to be very, very long. So it's often a bit tricky when it comes to intervening in a labour, that working with a woman who's having a long labour is it a good idea to break the waters or not is always up for debate. It's a tricky one to sort of navigate.
Mm. Yeah, and then from there onwards, like the intervention just kind of like, obviously I've done a lot of research this time around, so that kind of prompted everything to just go, you know, the opposite way that I had obviously hoped for. And yes, you are correct. That did cause Santino's head to be in the wrong position, and then his head was, I think, facing upwards. His body was in the correct position,
Right.
but unfortunately his head wasn't. And during the contractions, the heart rate started to drop quite significantly, and then that's why I ended up getting
Having a
an
Caesar.
emergency Caesar. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
had several different midwives and doctors come in to try and get me to change positions many times, and things like that, but nothing had worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you ended up with a Caesar with baby number 1. You were pregnant with baby number 2. You decided to make some different decisions. For the first thing, you decided to go for what's called a vaginal birth after caesarean, and you chose to do that at home. Can you tell us a little bit about that decision making?
I just did so much research. I guess I just watched a lot of actually I think it started by a friend of mine telling me that her sister-in-law had a successful VBAC at home.
Yeah.
I think she had possibly maybe 2 Caesars and then had one. I can't remember how many she had of which, but that kind of inspired me to try and, I guess, have one myself. And I'd done some like little, I guess, I listened to, I think maybe a couple of seminars online, and some, I guess, a lot of videos on social media and different, like, I guess, not necessarily like home birth, you know, like accounts, but a lot of people that trying to like believe in, you know, advocating for yourself.
Yeah.
And I guess just covering a broad range of, I guess, you know, different scenarios with birthing and things like that, and what could, I guess, happen, you know, in different circumstances. And I think that by me, I guess, finding Mari early on, it kind of like just opened my eyes a lot to, yes, I can do this. You know, I don't need to, I guess, be scared that it's going to end up like that again.
Yeah.
I mean, even though I had so many people, like my husband's family, especially, and like a lot of my cousins saying, you know, like pretty much saying that it's, you know, pretty risky and that I should be careful. I had one person tell me that like their sister had like horrible experiences for, you know, pretty much wanting, even thinking about having like a home birth. So she's like, it's better to have a hospital birth, you know, this and that. And I was like, I tried to block it all out, and I kept telling Mari about it, and she was like, yeah, they just ignore it. And yeah, and then
Can I
on the
just come in
day,
there, Dee? It's birth is one of those life events that is very significant in the lives of a woman, and because of that, we get very attached to our own sort of beliefs around it, our own perceptions of what's safe and what isn't. And for some reason, people seem to think it's okay to project their opinions about what's right for different mothers. The only person that can really navigate this path when it comes to having a baby is the woman having the baby. And she knows where she feels safe. Now, it's understandable why people think home birth is a dangerous form of birth, when in actual fact the data tells us quite the opposite. It has very, very good outcomes. And if you want to appreciate the perfect conditions for a mother to give birth in is actually at home. Even going to hospital, we're disturbing the process of birth. But that's okay for most women because that's where they feel safe. There's no judgment there, but we have to walk our own path. And
Yeah.
when you actually look at the evidence, home birth is very much a safe option, assuming that all the conditions in the pregnancy are showing that, because it can change at the blink of an eye, and people planning to have a home birth do end up in hospitals because it's a safer place to be. So it's never a given that you're going to birth at home, but it certainly needs to be available to women, and it's certainly a valid choice around that. So I think I just wanted to come in with that because it's not okay for any of us to have opinions about what other women should do. That woman's got to find her own path. So you felt really comfortable with your home birth midwife. You felt really confident in your choice. What sort of preparation did you do for this baby to get you ready for that?
What do you mean? Sorry. Like,
How did you
apart from
prepare
doing,
for baby number 2? Because you made a different choice with your caregiver, with having a home birth midwife, Mari. And then what choice, like what sort of preparation did you do for baby number?
I did the Transform Your Birth course,
Yeah,
and also made my partner do it as well. He didn't do the whole thing. He just did the stuff that I felt like were the most important.
yeah,
And he kind of, I guess, helped me a lot in preparing, I guess, mentally and things like that. And he was also kind of like, if people tried to scare me or turn me off it, he was like also advocating for me. And I think, like that just helped me a lot.
yeah,
I wouldn't say that the labor was pain-free or anything like that.
yeah,
But I definitely was able to, like go pain-free. Like I didn't use any pain relief.
yeah.
So
So
on the day,
before you go into that, Dee, can I just ask the question, was doing the course helpful for him to be complete, or was he completely on board with the home birth prior to that, or how did his sense of confidence around choosing a home birth evolve through that pregnancy?
like he was just, after number one, he just like was on board with everything, I think, because he just saw how how much I guess suffered after the first one, because I
Right.
think I realized I had a lot of trauma, after that, because
Mm.
I guess I blamed myself a lot that I didn't do things differently. And he saw how into, doing lots of different research that I was, and it was just, I guess, always there when I was, and also kind of listening to me when I had opinions on, what people were saying and things like that. And
Right.
he has also heard himself of people having successful VBACs at home, and I guess that helped him a lot.
Yeah, cool. And when you did the course, what sort of changes did you experience as a result of that sort of preparation?
Trying to think, sorry. um I guess like just doing a lot of, I guess, the breathing side of things, like that helped a lot.
Yeah.
Just, I guess, doing a lot of the nose breathing, like becoming more aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um and also not doing things that I did with the first pregnancy. So I did a lot of meditation
Mm.
with the first pregnancy, but it was also always that like really deep breathing. But
Mm.
as you mentioned in the course, that's not necessarily the right way to do it.
Yeah.
It's more about just like being aware of your breath, and I guess
And not
just
over breathing.
and not over breathing and things like
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
And
So
that helped me a lot. Yeah.
yeah, that's good. It sounds like your belief system, though, around your ability to do it was already well and truly in place before you even did the course, which has come from all of that research and seeing evidence of other women being able to overcome those challenges. That's wonderful. So tell us how the day unfolded.
Okay, so I was, I think, in bed when I got my very first contraction, I think like past midnight, on Monday and Tuesday morning. And then I think by about 6 a.m. I was like calling my midwife saying, hey, look, I think it's definitely happening now. And Mari's like, okay, like let me know when they get this far apart. And because I didn't know how to time them properly, I think the first time round, but obviously with her experience and knowledge, she was able to like properly, explain everything to me. And I think I just kind of pushed through everything for as long as I could. I had the TENS machine. Don't know if
How
you've
did you
heard of
find
it.
that?
I mean, at first I was like, oh yeah, like this is cool. But as like labor really progressed, I don't think it really did anything. It was more of a distraction,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Which can
I
be
think,
very helpful for some women. Mm.
yeah. I think it was like good. I think it was good that I did buy it. But I think that, yeah, it was more of like a distraction rather than like a pain relief, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah.
But my aim was to only use that and not have anything else.
Yeah.
And then I think it was around, what time did Mari arrive? Probably around 11 or 12, I think. At that point, I was getting ready to go in the pool. And I had my husband kind of like just walk around with me and just do whatever I wanted to do. So I think I was just pacing up and down the house
Yeah.
for a long time. And I guess I just didn't really want to go in the pool yet, because I knew that I would have had to take the TENS machine off. So I just walked around up and down for a very long time, and he was kind of reminding me what to do, and
Oh,
like
good.
from the course.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was literally screaming. I didn't think that I was going to have to scream, but I was screaming.
Well,
Yeah.
vocalizing in labour can be a wonderful way of releasing the intensity of what women are experiencing. So it's very normal for women to make noises, and they can be pretty primal, scary sounding noises. Did
Yeah.
the actual scream, well, you call it screaming, was it screaming or just vocalizing, or did you feel, what were you feeling when you were making those noises?
Just just pain. Just, yeah, it was crazy. It was, yeah, the most intense feeling ever. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you're
'Cause you
alive.
forget, like you forget you've already gone through it the first time. Yeah. And then I think Mari arrived with her student midwife, Elise, who was wonderful. And then they continued to go in the pool. But I happened to have like a pain that I guess wasn't a labor pain. It was more of like a referring pain. And so she was concerned that it was potentially the scar
Right.
from like, what's it called? Like there's a name for it. Like after a Caesar, that is it a uterine rupture? I think
So,
it is.
yeah, rupturing of the uterus. It's one of the risks that they worry about with women who've had cesareans, although uterine rupture can happen both with women who've had cesareans and women who haven't. So it's not an exclusive thing to women who've had cesareans, but
Mm,
obviously that would be something Mari would be keeping an eye on around
yes.
pain. Yeah. So you
Yeah.
started to experience some different pains?
I think even before she arrived, I did. But it would come and go. And the pain was in my left abdomen.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of not, I wouldn't say it was like where the scar was, but I think she like potentially thought it was like a referred pain from that area.
Yeah.
And so I eventually finished packing, because I had packed a bag just in case for the hospital, but we just added some things in there, and then I drove to the hospital, and yeah, from there onwards got into a room, and then she was not able to advocate for me anymore. Not sure if you know that, but once you
Yeah. So unfortunately, it's very difficult for private midwives to get what's called visiting rights, which is the ability to transition their women into hospital and still remain a part of their primary care team. And that's really unfortunate when hospitals haven't either let that happen, or the process of doing it can be long and arduous. For the emotional state of the mother, knowing that she still has her midwife there who can advocate for her, who can negotiate her care, is very important. But it can be very difficult for midwives when they're not given that level of respect and invitation in the labour room in hospitals. It's one of the issues that can happen with home births. It's always good, if you're planning a home birth, to talk about transitioning into hospital and where the duty of care is. Do they have visiting rights? Will they be able to continue to advocate for you in that space? So yeah, I think
she did tell me, like, we did plan ahead for all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a good thing to understand. So when you were in the hospital, what was she able to do or not do?
She was still able to guide me, and she helped me, like, just, I guess, getting to the bath, and helped, like, just gave me whatever I wanted. Yeah,
So
exactly.
with your monitoring, were you able to have a bit of a break from it at different times?
Oh, I refused it.
Okay.
So yeah, sorry, I'll go from the beginning. So when I first arrived, met Lisa, I was in the shower, and Elise, the student midwife, she was able to, I guess, she wasn't able to advocate, but she was kind of like able to do more, I think. I think because she was put down as one of the birthing midwives. I'm not sure how it
Right.
worked.
Okay.
But I think because she was, like, essentially, like, practicing to, I guess, be like a midwife. So she doesn't have much long left till she's becomes qualified.
Yeah.
So she was there in the shower with me, and just, like, always just being really supportive.
Nice.
And so Lisa kept, I guess, asking me to put the monitor on, and I was like, no, I don't want it. Not, I just kind of, like, just dismissed it because I was in the shower. And then afterwards, I think I got into the bath, and that's when all the other what do you call them, like, practitioners came in, like the doctors and midwives, and they were trying to, I guess, say, you need to put this on, or you need to do this, do that, because I think Murray had mentioned the pain to them, and I think they might have just, like, started to freak out, and I think their intentions were to start, intervening from that point. But she was still kind of, like, able to, I guess, guide me into saying no and things like that, if that makes sense. I'm just trying to picture. I can't exactly remember what they were trying to force upon me, but I know that it wasn't what I, had planned for, if that makes sense. And so I think
any procedures, anything, it's important for all women to know that you do have choice. There can be a great deal of pressure for women to do certain things because your caregivers are always wired to look for potential risks. And so they're that safety net. They're there to keep you safe and to make sure things go okay. But sometimes some of the procedures can create complexity as much as eliminate it. So making decisions can be very tricky. Having someone as experienced as your home birth midwife can help you to understand where the wriggle room is for you to be able to make choices and to say no to certain things. But of course, the caregivers in the hospital are trained to do this. It's part of what they perceive as being their duty of care. So this is where different belief systems can collide. about what is the safest and best way forward, given that you weren't showing any signs of uterine rupture by the time you got in there, no bleeding, no, other sort of symbols. Your home birth midwife was erring on the side of caution with that referred pain, but she had to also manage risk as well. But of course, going
Yeah, it was a bit on the fence kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So this is where decision making can get a little bit tricky. So you had these health professionals come in. There would have been a lot of pressure for you to do certain things. How did you feel in being able to voice what your needs were? And did you feel like you were respected in that space?
I do. But I also felt like they weren't going to stop. Like they were going to continue to, I guess, ask me, to do things like get hooked up to the machines and things like that.
Yeah.
The only thing I eventually gave into was the gas,
Yeah.
which I, again, like the TENS machine, eventually just was more of a distraction. And I know some women are able to get like the relief from it, but I wasn't, unfortunately. But it was fine. Like I ended up getting to the point where I think I was in transition not long after that. And at that point, I was like, I can't do this. I was like, I need to do something. And they were trying to get me to take those water injections, I think.
Oh, yeah.
But they said that they were going to sting a lot. And I was like, oh, I'm not up for that. So I had no pain relief. But yeah, I eventually went onto the bed, and I think I don't know what position I was in initially, but Mari got to the point where she put the bed all the way up so that I was quite elevated. So my chin and my elbows were on top of the edge of the bed, if that makes sense. Um, and she was like kind of guiding me of, what positions to go in, do this, do that. But the hospital midwife was trying to kind of to help me to go into other positions which weren't going to benefit me. Yeah.
I wonder why she felt the need to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you found your position and you were able to stay in that position that felt comfortable for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had to keep like, I guess lifting one leg up or lifting the other leg up and things like that.
Yeah.
So I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, no, that's good. These are sort of, as the baby starts to descend, doing different things like that can help reposition a little head that might be a bit malpositioned. And so they're often very clever at helping women to create the right forces to help that baby navigate its way through. So what ended up happening?
Oh, yes. So then the obstetrician came back in, and everyone was like, there were a lot of people there, but I ended up pushing, and the baby came out after, I think, yes, like 2 hours of pushing. He was quite big. He was 4.2 something,
Oh,
4.25.
well
Whereas
done.
my firstborn was only 3.4, I think. Yeah, so
You grew a beautiful
big.
big baby. Yeah.
Yeah, very big. And during the pushing stages, I wasn't comfortable because I had done my own research, I guess, when it comes to avoiding a tear. And a lot of women say only push when you feel like pushing. But Lisa was kind of, I guess, forcing me to push when I didn't want to push. And I didn't feel like, something was right. And I ended up having a 3A tear. And I kind of hemorrhaged at the end. Yeah. Because Murray was, telling me to take my time, but also obviously encouraging me, to push when I felt I needed to push.
Yeah.
Whereas Lisa was telling me to keep pushing even when I didn't feel like I needed to push. And I kind of felt like I was going to tear, but I didn't know it was that bad.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? When you're in a situation where you're relying on your caregivers to hold space for you to respond to what your body's telling you to do, whilst at the same time taking in the medical, or not medical, the professional judgment around situations. What your story is highlighting really clearly is different people have different beliefs and different approaches. And that conflicting advice can be very confusing, particularly when you're in labour and you can't even think, let alone make a judgment call about whose wisdom is one you're going to follow. I think it's really unfortunate that there wasn't more collaboration between somebody as experienced as your home birth midwife. Home birth midwives, they don't do home births unless they're very, very experienced. And I'd be looking at her wisdom around this sort of stuff as being your primary carer. But of course, she's not in a position to be able to take that role on in the hospital. So that gets really, really tricky. But you'll find it, a new midwife will come on shift and she'll have a different approach, or she'll tell you need to do this or need to do that. What we do know about tearing is one of the things that can help avoid tearing is carefully managing the perineum, which it could be with a warm compress. We know that reduces the rates of tearing. And we know that too much pushing for too long can create a lot of tension in the mother's body and not give her the time and the space to open. But of course, they give you 2 hours, and then after 2 hours, there's this feeling that they need to come in and help a baby, even if the baby's not showing signs of distress. So there's a lot of competing agendas that can play out in this situation. I think the most important thing when it comes to being able to make good decisions in this space is to really develop confidence in yourself to know what you need, and the ability to ask for what it is that you want in that space through things like birth maps or birth preferences, which can support you to communicate what your needs are during the birth process. We do know it came out of the New South Wales Birth Trauma Inquiry recently released that there's a much greater focus on shared decision making and really empowering women to own the decisions through the birth process in order to be much happier with the outcome, rather than people doing things to them and not listening to the needs of the mother and not respecting her voice. So having caregivers that you can trust and have a relationship with really is the key. And if you can't get it in the system itself, if you're in the public or private system where you don't know who the midwives are going to be on the day, then a doula can be a very helpful form of continuity through that space, or even a student midwife. You took from your experience with your first birth, you made a decision that was a powerful decision to take more responsibility, to birth this baby at home, to get yourself that continuity of care. You had that through your midwife as well as a student midwife. You had your partner who was really on board, who knew a lot more about how to help you and find comfort. So that's a pretty powerful thing to do, Dee. And you set yourself on a goal of having a vaginal birth after caesarean, which you ultimately achieved. The journey through which we go through with every baby that we have has a lot to teach us. And it sounds to me like your voice was definitely heard. You got very clear about what sort of support that you needed for round 2, and you ultimately achieved the goal that you wanted. What did you learn about yourself as a result of going through that process?
Like that I like stronger than what I thought I was. And that I guess that I don't need to be so isolated and so scared of not only I guess labor and birth, but after, because with my firstborn I was very isolated, and I guess just very unknowledgeable about the process overall. Yeah.
You certainly changed that with baby number 2, didn't you?
Yeah.
Well done. I always marvel at the strength women have to overcome challenges. And whilst, we can't control birth, we can certainly influence it, and we can certainly find resources and tools within us to help us to overcome whatever that mystery of birth unfolds within us and causes us to go through. So well done to you, Dee, and I'm so happy that you were able to achieve that goal ultimately. I think Dee's story today has taught us that there's more than one way to do this, that you'll often find competing agendas in the birth space around what is the best way forward, that women have to step up, as Dee said, do the research, get informed, do the preparation, start to learn more about the process of birth and how we can keep pregnancies and women and babies safe, not always through intervention. There can be more risks with intervention than non-intervening. But to really start to get your heads around this process, because when you start to take more responsibility, you're much more likely to be happier with the outcome on the other side. So thanks everybody for listening, and thank you to Dee for sharing her powerful story around making different choices and going for, and really educating yourself and going for what you want in the birth process. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and share this podcast. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Why not take advantage of a special gift for all pregnant women at transformyourbirth.com.au. Or if you have children, we have a gift for parents also.